What's going on, main salians, main sailors, and the fine people of YouTube? Today, we're going to be talking about St. Patrick's Day. The history behind it, some of the darker parts of it, especially the reason we turn our food green. There's actually a really sadistic reason behind that, and leave it to Western civilization to mock other countries' downfalls and sad times into our weird spin on it. Some of you are experiencing a full throttle quarantine, San Francisco being one, and it looks like the situation is only going to get worse as it pertains to the coronavirus. It sounds like something from an apocalyptic movie, but unfortunately it's very real, and we're going through it, but we're going to get through this together. So today, let's get a little bit Irish, and kiss me because I'm Irish, not Irish. It just looks like I'm Irish, I'm not. Because today we talk about St. Patrick's Day. So, for those who aren't history buffs, St. Patrick's wasn't actually Irish, surprisingly enough, but he is considered the patron saint of Ireland. But he was actually born in Bantaventa, Brunei. It was a town in Roman Britain sometime in the late 300s AD. And yeah, he wasn't Irish. And his name wasn't Patrick either, it was Maewyn Sacate. And he didn't care for that, so he chose the name Patricus down the line. He actually had many monikers throughout his life. He was known by many as Maginus, the others as Sacatus. His father, Calpurnius, was a deacon in the early Christian church, but Patrick wasn't much of a believer himself. It wasn't until he was captured by Irish pirates at the age of 16 and enslaved for 6 years as a shepherd that he chose to convert to Christianity. While in northeastern Ireland, Patrick learned the Irish language and culture before attempting to escape back to Britain. But Patrick wasn't very good at escaping apparently, because he was captured again. This time by the French. He was held in France, where he learned all about monasticism before he was released and sent home to Britain, where he continued to study Christianity well into his 20s. Eventually, Patrick claimed he had a vision that told him to bring Christianity to the Irish people, who were predominantly pagan and druidic at the time. So Patrick, he made his way back to Ireland and brought a big old bag of Christianity with him. When Patrick arrived back in Ireland, however, he and his preaching ways were not welcomed, so he had to leave and land on some small islands off the coast. There he began to gain followers, and he eventually moved to the mainland to spread Christian ideologies across Ireland for many years to come. During this time, Patrick baptized thousands of people. Some say over 100,000 people were baptized by the hands of Patrick. Ordained new priests, guided women to nunhood, converted the sons of kings in the region, and aided in the formation of over 300 churches. Another common misconception was folklore telling that Patrick banished all of the snakes from Ireland. But as badass as that may sound, there were actually never any snakes on the island to begin with. But he was responsible for popularizing the shamrock, or that three-leafed plant you'll see plastered all over the place today. According to legend, Patrick used it to teach the Irish of the concept of the Christian Holy Trinity. They had already had triple deities and regarded the number 3 highly. So Patrick's use of the shamrock may have helped him to win a great deal of favor with the Irish. Nowadays, Patricus is known to most as St. Patrick. Though he's not technically a canonized saint by the Catholic Church, he's well regarded throughout the Christian world. But why the holiday? Why March 17th? And what do we think of a non-Irish, non-snake charmer as a symbol of Ireland? St. Paddy's Day started as a religious celebration in the 17th century to commemorate the life of St. Patrick's and the arrival of Christianity in Ireland. This feast day always took place on the anniversary of Patrick's death, which was believed to be March 17th, 461 AD. In the early 18th century, Irish immigrants brought the tradition over to the American colonies, and it was there that St. Patrick started to become the symbol of Irish heritage and culture that he is today. As more Irish came to the Atlantic, the feast day celebration slowly grew in popularity. So much so, in fact, the first ever St. Patrick's Day parade was held in Boston in 1737. Well before America was even established. By the mid-19th century, the United States saw a massive influx of Irish immigrants hoping to escape the Great Famine. This transformed the relatively small-scale feast day observance into a full-blown celebration that people wanted to be a part of, whether they are Irish or not. In 1903, Feast Day became a national holiday in Ireland, and over time it transformed into what is now known as St. Patrick's Day. The holiday has since been celebrated all over the world in countries like the United States, Great Britain, Canada, Argentina, Australia, New Zealand, Switzerland, Russia, and even throughout Asia. As it happens, St. Paddy's Day is so popular, it's thought to be celebrated in more countries than any other national festival. What was once a fairly chill day of going to Mass, watching a parade, and eating a hearty meal with family has transformed into the biggest party in the world. Why do we wear green on St. Patrick's Day? And I'll tell you right now, there's a lot more to it than the protection from pinching fingers. It goes back to the Irish Rebellion, when Irish soldiers wore green as they fought off the British in their trademark red. Until then, the color associated with St. Patrick's and Feast Day was actually blue. The song soldiers sang during the war in 1798, The Wearing of the Green, changed all of that and made green the color of shamrocks, Ireland's mainstay color. From then on, people wore green on St. Patrick's Day in solidarity. And when Chicago dyed their river green for the first time in 1962, the practice of wearing and decorating in green became a part of pop culture. It's now commonplace to bust out your best greens in mid-March. So why do we binge drink? Obviously, a lot of us enjoy a drink, maybe too much drinking, any other day. But on St. Patrick's Day, it feels like maybe that's just what we should be doing. So why, on St. Patrick's Day, do we feel we have to drink? It's part historical subtext, part us succumbing to advertising, and part stereotyping. Originally, St. Patrick's Day, or Feast Day, saw the lifting of Lent restrictions for the day, giving Christians a breather as they made their way to Easter. Basically, it was a day to eat and drink as much as you please in celebration, hence the traditional Irish meal of bacon and cabbage. But imbibing on whiskey and beer was not part of the equation. In fact, pubs in Ireland were forced by law to shut down for the holiday until later in the 20th century. And drinking alcohol on St. Patrick's Day was greatly frowned upon until the late 1970s. Disco era. Then, a huge marketing push from Budweiser in the 80s convinced thirsty revelers that drinking beer and St. Patrick's Day were one and the same. The rest is drunk history nobody seems to remember, as it's all been replaced in our heads with quotes from Boondock Saints. Much like Cinco de Mayo, many people now use the holiday as an excuse to binge drink, which fosters negative stereotypes by incorrectly associating the act of getting wasted with Irish culture. So, why do we color all of our food green? There's a very, very dark history as to why we do that. So, historian Christine Kinnelly says there's a bitter history to eating green that harks back to Ireland's darkest chapter. During the Irish potato famine of the 1840s, mass starvation forced many Irish to flee their homeland in search of better times in America and elsewhere. Kinnelly says those who stayed behind turned to desperate measures. People were so deprived of food that they resorted to eating grass, Kinnelly says. In Irish folk memory, they talk about people's mouths being green as they died. At least 1 million Irish died in the span of 6 years, says Kinnelly, which is why for Kinnelly, an Irishwoman who hails from the Dublin in County Mayo, the sight of green-tinged edibles intended as a joyous nod to Irish history can be jolting. Before I came to America, she says, I've never seen a green bagel. For Irish Americans, they think of dyeing food green, they think of everything as happy. But really, in terms of the famine, this is very sad imagery. And that's not saying that Irish are offended by the food coloring. After all, the color is closely linked with Ireland, known as the Emerald Isle, because of its strikingly verdant countryside. In the 19th century, Irish nationalists and Republicans adopted the color. As Ireland's The Journal points out, this was likely to distinguish themselves from the reds and blues that they were associated with England, Scotland, and Wales. And obviously, as a huge horror fan, they have capitalized on this day with the making of Leprechaun, which is one of the better horror movies in my estimation, and today is the day for that to be watched in a fashion of marathon. So that's just a little bit of the history of St. Patrick's Day. Again, I hope you enjoyed this, and subscribe to my channel because there'll be more content like this, especially the darker side of history as it pertains to what has happened, because I feel like a lot of misinformation has been taught to us, so it's better to have real information out there for you to decide what you believe, but this is pretty much the facts. So again, I'm Marshall Mainsails. Keep it safe, keep it healthy, and until next time, keep it locked.